Hail, hail, it's Joe here from the HomeBhoys podcast. In the past couple of weeks, you might have heard me talk about the song that I donated to Paddy Hill, the song that I wrote years ago about Paddy Hill. And I've donated to his Miscarriages of Justice organisation, their Songs for Freedom project. And I mentioned that the possibility of getting Paddy on a podcast might pop up. Well, that happened this week on a Wednesday evening. Paul and Paddy were in Ireland and they were very kind. They gave me an hour of their time, literally just as they were about to board a plane to back to Glasgow. And we sat down and we chatted. We talked about Paddy's story. We talked about miscarriages of justice. We talked about the lack of support that victims of miscarriages of justice receive. Loads of really thought-provoking things in the podcast you're about to listen to. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Like most HomeBhoys Extras podcasts, it's kind of a bit different to anything else we do. But hopefully you'll enjoy it. I was absolutely loved talking to Paddy and Paul. It was brilliant. There's a lot of things that I learned that I wasn't aware of at all. Things they told me during the podcast and after the podcast. And it was a delight to meet them. As the downloading of the song goes, there were some technical issues on the Mojo website whereby I was charging shipping costs. That's no longer an issue. So by the end of this podcast, if you listen after the podcast, there'll be an extra little bit explaining where you can download the song, and I will start tweeting the links again so people can start downloading it and support this great organisation. So without further ado, here is a podcast with Paddy Hill of the Birmingham Six and of Miscarriages of Justice Organisation Scotland, and Paul McLaughlin, also of Miscarriages of Justice Organisation Scotland, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
For 16 and a half years, we've been used as political scapegoats for people in there at the highest. The police told us from the start that they knew we hadn't done it. They told us they didn't care who done it. They told us that we were selected and that they were going to frame us just to keep the people in there happy. That's what it's all about. Justice. I don't think them people in there have got the intelligence nor the honesty to spell the word, never mind dispense it. They're rotten.
Hail, hail, and welcome to the HomeBhoys Extra podcast here. Anybody who listens to the show knows that the HomeBhoys Extra podcasts are pretty much left of centre and quite different to anything else that we do. And this one was just another example of that. In the past, we've done Hillsborough disaster, we've done Danny O'Connor, Rob Kelly, Athletic Club Bilbao. We've done all manner of stuff. We like to keep these as a kind of a separate offshoot podcast whereby we can address things that aren't necessarily what we would talk about on other podcasts. So anybody listening to the show recently would have heard me talk about the song that I donated to Miscarriages of Justice in relation to Paddy Hill and the work that's being done there. And if you haven't heard that, go back and listen to the podcast. There's a blog up on Hail Hail Media. You can check it out. Without more talking and more me blabbing on, we're down to it. We're in the Carlton Hotel outside Dublin Airport, and I'm joined by Paddy Hill himself and Paul McLaughlin of Miscarriages of Justice Scotland. Thanks very much for coming and meet me here, lads.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting us.
So, Paddy, I've mentioned on the show about how kind of I got involved by donating the song, whatever, and obviously, I've mentioned the show before regardless of the song that I wrote as regards to you. But a lot of people on our show, maybe a lot of younger listeners that might not be fully aware of who you are and your story. And I don't want to kind of take up the bulk of the podcast talking about that, but I would like to kind of get a brief sort of history. You'd been living in Birmingham since the 60s.
Yeah.
And it was in 1974 that yourself and 5 others were arrested for the Birmingham pub bombings.
Well, only one was arrested.
Only one was arrested?
You were Celtic, and the other 5 of us went to the police station of our own free will.
Okay. So, and that was people, without trying to get, sort of bury the lead here, that was something that necessarily just changed the course of all of your lives forever. Changed everything for you. You were a family man in England.
All of us were. All of us were married and all settled and what have you. We had 27 children between the 6 of us. And I never forget that. Even as I'm talking to you, Joe, I still remember getting out of that police car on my own with my bag, and there's 2 little flights of steps going up into the police station, and little did I realise when I walked up those steps that was the last steps of freedom I was to take for 16 and a half years.
And I've heard you talk in the past about how at that time you didn't really think that anything was untoward. You didn't think that anything was going to happen. You thought it was going to be just some sort of
it was just routine as far as we were concerned. They told us about bombs going off in England,
But of course, at that time, your bombs were going off all over the place.
Yeah.
And, it was nothing. But this time then, we were told it was serious in Birmingham and that people were killed and what have you. And that we were asked if we had any objections to seeing the Birmingham police, and we said no. So anyway, we got down there, and of course, there's 2 police forces involved. The Heysham and Morecambe police force and the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad. In respect of the Heysham and Morecambe police, I make no allegations whatsoever against them. They were absolutely brilliant. I tell everyone they couldn't have treated the Queen or any of her family any better than they treated me. I had a great crack with 2 Morecambe police officers, Willoughby and Sergeant Watson. And of course, it was at 6:30 in the morning when everything changed. I was sitting there reading the book Bird Island by Alistair MacLean. I'd read it before, and I'm skip reading it while I'm waiting for the Birmingham police. I've already made a detailed statement to the Morecambe police, and they came back at 6 o'clock in the morning and told me that everything I told them was 100% true. We also found out years later that the Special Branch and the Security Force in the north of Ireland told them to let us go, that they knew all about it and that we weren't involved in any form of republicanism or IRA activities. But then the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad came on the scene. And I remember looking out the door, when the door opened and these 2 cops walked in and they threw 2 buns of clothes down there. And I could feel them looking at me, and I looked up and you could feel the hatred coming off them. And I looked out the door and I seen this cop standing there, and he's got 2 guns, shoulder holster and a sidearm. And I remember looking and I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, some poor bastard's in for a rough ride. Not for 1 second did I think it had anything to do with us. And then of course the Birmingham police came in and they told us right from the start. Sergeant Bennett, who ended up becoming their commander a couple of years later, turned around and told us straight from the beginning, quote, "We know you didn't do the bombings. We know you're innocent. We don't care who done them." And then they told us that they had their orders. And he pulled a bit of paper out and he said, "Me here, read that, you little Irish bastard. Read it. Look what it says there. Our orders are," look what it says, "our orders are that we are to get confessions and convictions. And we're to use any means that we have to obtain them. Don't worry, you're covered all the way to the top." And he turned around and he says to me, he says, "Listen, we didn't pick you." And he pointed at the scene and he went, "You've been selected by members at the highest level of government, and that's the orders they have given us. Now you can have it the easy way or the hard way. The easy way, sign the false confession forms, or we can fill it out together, or else they didn't care, just sign them and we'll fill it out on our own." And that was it. And he said that if we didn't have it the easy way, then we'd have it the hard way. And he made a circular motion with his finger, and the hard way was round the walls. And I went, I ain't signing, and that was as far as I got. And they played football with us for the next 3 days.
And you say the hard way was obviously the beatings and the torture.
The torture, the brutality, the mock executions. They knocked all my teeth out.
Yeah.
Broke all my teeth with a gun, etc. And I was fortunate in one way, or unfortunate, all depends on what way you look at it, Joe. But I was the only one out of the 6 of us that had any dealings with the cops. I've been in trouble with the cops since I was a kid, 15 when I first went to Birmingham. And I realised the discrimination towards the Irish and what have you. Like, when I first went to Birmingham, big signs on the factory walls, vacancies apply within. And next to it, there'd be another sign, no paddies or no wogs need apply, we don't employ them. And that's the way it was in Birmingham. And what you call it, so I'd been in trouble with the cops and I knew the score. And what you call it, I never thought that anything about it until, say, they started torturing us. And it was only after the Saturday night that I found out that Billy Powers had made a statement. And of course, when we come to our trial, well, when we went to court, we were charged, and before we even made an appearance in court, we were charged about 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that, on the Sunday afternoon. And at 5:30, 6 o'clock, you had the Assistant Chief Constable, Maurice Buck, making a word statement to all the press and the television that they caught the people who'd done it. We were covered from head to toe in jelly night, and we'd all made confessions, etc., etc. And when you look at the 4 false confessions, it's an absolute, in one confession, there's 12 bombs. We've all got 2 carrier bags each, with a bomb in each. And another one, Johnny Walker's, there's 2 brown parcels, like a huge parcels wrapped up in brown paper. And another one, there's 8 bombs. and another one was 6. And they're all planted outside the pub and what have you, the Tunda. But there's no follow-up details. I've never been asked a question in my life about the Birmingham pub bombs.
As to whether you did it, like, no one's ever approached that.
Well, they never asked it because they told us from the start that they knew we had nothing to do with it. So there's no sense in asking us about something that they know we have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
And that was it.
So, like, it's just essentially sacrificial lambs. So somebody had to go down.
They wanted to stop a public outcry. That's what it was all about. Because of the riots and the people in Birmingham, Irish centre was burned, petrol bomb, Irish pubs were getting petrol bombed, etc., etc. They were marching to bring back hanging. Mm-hmm. People wouldn't work with any of the Irish. Any of the Irish was working in Birmingham. When they went into work that day, a lot of them were beaten up, including my own father.
Jesus.
My father was a soldier in the British Army for 30 years.
That's right. A lot of people don't understand that you come from like a military family.
I had 3 brothers in the British Army at the time. One in the Paras, and another one I think was in the Green Jackets. And then my older brother, he joined the British Army in 1959 when my dad came out of it. Even when I was in jail, my older brother was in the British Army, used to come and visit me any time he wanted. He didn't come out of the British Army until 1987, 88. You know?
Yeah, this is one thing that actually surprised me that I'd never known until recently. You know?
Yeah, and you know, and what you call it, and of course when we first got charged in the court, the cops turned around and told us that they arranged a reception committee at Windsor Green Prison, and of course when we got to Windsor Green Prison on the Monday morning about 11:30, there was about 15 or so prison officers there, and the cops, they put us against the wall and they brought us out one at a time and they started telling, well, he made a statement and blah blah blah, he admitted, and then they come to Jerry Hunter. Oh, he wouldn't make a statement, but he said he didn't give a fuck how many got killed. All this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Then they brought me out. I hadn't made a statement and what have you, and I was supposed to be the bomb maker. And Johnny Walker, Hughie Kellican, had given us all ranks. Like if anybody knows anything about the IRA, there is no rank. The only time you get a rank is when you're dead, and it's only an honorary title, lieutenant.
Stick up on the wall.
Exactly, and that's it. But then all of a sudden, Johnny Walker was a brigadier. And the cops were rubbing their hands. Oh, didn't they realise Johnny Walker's the highest ranking innocent man that they ever caught? You know, and this is the thing. And of course, we didn't go to be tried. We just went to be convicted and sentenced. We were already convicted before we were even charged.
Yeah.
And that was the way. And as I try to tell people, we ended up in an unfortunate catch-22 situation where we could never prove our innocence until after we were found guilty. And that's sad to say, but that's the way it was. Because nobody wanted to believe at the time, other than our immediate families.
And the wheels of justice weren't going to stop at anything.
No. And of course, at the same time, little did we know, Joe, that within the members that was left in Birmingham, they already had nicked 16 of them in the March or April of 74. And whatever was left of them, little did we know, or they know themselves, that there was an informer.
In among them?
In amongst them.
Okay.
And of course, shortly after the bomb was when they put our names up on the television and all that. He seen it.
Yeah.
And he went and got in touch with his handlers and he made a detailed statement to them. And he told them, you've got the wrong man. These people have nothing to do with the IRA. The only thing about these people is that they're Irish, that's all. That's it. And he told her, and he made a detailed statement, he told them the names of the 2 people who made the bombs, where they were made, beside Birmingham City football ground, in a lock-up garage. And he named the 3 people who came along and picked them up about an hour or so later and planted them.
So I mean, it's quite clear that nothing was going to stop you going to prison?
No. Nothing was going to stop us.
So you were sentenced, given a life sentence in 1975, and you were released in 1991.
Yeah.
I mean, in between all that time, I mean, I kind of want to move on to Mojo through this. I mean, in between that time, I mean, how does your release come about? I mean, who's fighting for you? I mean, if you guys are in prison and like literally, I'd say imagine everything that was done to silence your voice.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I mean, who goes out and helps you helps to get you guys out of prison? Because I remember from being a kid seeing you come out of prison. I also remember growing up knowing about you being in prison. You know what I mean? And knowing, like, being common knowledge, even as a child, that you were innocent. And it was like just people wanting to get you out of prison. I remember you seeing us come out of prison and being like an amazing feeling, an amazing day, and not being fully aware of what it was. But I mean, who was on the outside fighting for you? I mean, as you're kind of doing that for other people.
There was only our families and what have you. the wives, and then of course the daughters got older, they started campaigning. But the big turning point was shortly after Giuseppe Conlon died, because Cardinal Newman and what have you, to come in, and they were convinced of his innocence and what have you. And of course with ourselves, our breakthrough came through in 1984 when I got in touch with my MP. It was Margaret Harbour, Leicester Prison, because if you're a life sentence prisoner, the prison you're in, that is your home address, and whatever MP represents that constituency is your MP.
I didn't know that.
And I was very fortunate to get a man called Sir John Farr, who sadly is no longer with us, a Tory, ex-22 backbench committee member, Sir John Farr, everything, and he lived locally, and he come and see me. And of course, the other thing that happened was, you might remember the old McGill magazine here in Dublin that printed here. They printed my letter in 1982, beginning of 83, and that snowballed to a few other places. And then of course Chris Mullen, the MP, became an MP. He at the time was the Labour Party editor of the Labour Party paper, the Tribune, and he printed the letter. And of course, when Sir John Farr came and told me, and I asked him to go and check out the forensics and all that, and he came back and told me that he had checked it out with a friend of his who was an explosives expert, and the friend told him that the paperwork that the forensic was on, the forensic wasn't worth the paperwork. It was a complete load of garbage, and that anyone should seriously contest any of the validity of the forensics. And of course Sir John Farr then asked me what happened, and I sat with him from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening in Gartley Prison, and I told him everything that happened to us. And it snowballed from there. Then of course, in respect of the Maguire 7, you had the forensic scientist Dr. Yallop, who done the thing about the smoke.
Yes.
World in Action came in, and then of course the cop came in, Tom Clark, who admitted that we were being tortured and that sleep deprivation, that was the orders, etc., etc. And of course then they done the Who Bombed Birmingham. And of course, because of all the people getting involved, we then had an investigation by the Devon and Cornwall police. We went to court, the appeal court, in 1987. Lord Lane, the Lord Chief Justice, he ruled that he would take the case himself, and he presided over it. And we had 22 witnesses. Most of them were working for the Crown. We had the head of Special Branch from Leicester, from the Midlands. We had prison officers. We had police officers, ex-police officers, and they all gave evidence on our behalf. And Lord Justice then, he turned around and knocked every one of them down and said that they were either lying or they're just too unbelievable to be true, or else they were mistaken.
So, and I've heard you speak about this, and I kind of want to bring this further on. I want to kind of go forward and back a wee bit in terms of subject matter. I mean, and I've heard you say before that, I mean, they would have rather seen, like, the higher ups would have rather have seen you all dead rather than see the justice system put into disrepute.
Oh yeah, 2 weeks after Jerry Conlon got out in October '89, Lord Denny, the Master of the Rolls, was away out of the country at the time, but he came back a few days after Jerry got out, and he was asked about it, and he turned around and stated, wouldn't it have been better to hang them, because if it had been hung, if we'd have hung the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6, we wouldn't be bringing in the British justice system into disrepute.
And that was the bottom line for them.
And that was the bottom line. And even today, there's people still saying the same thing. You know? That's how biased and how rotten and corrupt and evil these people really are.
Yeah. And again, I want to go jump ahead.
Is everything okay for you?
Yes, thank you.
Do you want to coffee? Just jumping ahead to go, like, I mean, in 91 when you were released, in terms of getting Mojo off the ground, was it something that you planned? Like, when you found out you were being released, you knew straight away you wanted to go into doing something like that, or did you kind of take time?
No, when I came out, I left Winston Silcott, who was one of the men convicted at the Tottenham riots, PC Breaklock, and I left Jimmy Robinson, who was one of the men known as the Bridgewater Four, who were convicted of the young paper boy called Bridgewater. And Jimmy Robinson was 2 cells away from me, and a wee Scots boy, John McGronicle, and others. And I promised him the first year of my life, campaigning for him. But of course, when I came out and I started campaigning, and then I became involved, I met members of the families, And it was only then that I realised, hang on, is this what my family went through? And of course, the more you get involved with the families, the more... And then I realised there was a need for it. And of course, I financed Mojo myself. When all the money that I got out of my compensation, people think that the Birmingham Six and what have you, and the Guildford Four got millions of pounds. None of us even got $1 million.
You didn't get compensated until 10 years after you were released.
What they did, my compensation, they gave me £50,000 3 weeks after I come out. We had nowhere to live. So they gave us $150,000 on the 9th of October, 91. I bought a flat in North London and Muswell Hill, 100 grand. The rest of the money I used to finance myself to go and speak at campaigns and visit people in prison, etc. And then I ran out of money a couple of years later. And in 94, I think it was, I was summoned to the court, heavy magistrate, for non-payment of a month's council tax. The magistrate was a woman, and she thought it was a bit of a publicity stunt in respect of my compensation. And I had to tell her, it's not I haven't got any money. I was £30,000 in debt then because I borrowed money of people. It was all about benefits. I said, we don't get benefits because we hadn't paid any stamps while we were in jail.
Yeah.
So therefore we were barred from any sort of benefits.
More or less just ghosts coming into prison, like.
Nothing. And of course, because of that, they gave us another £100,000 in 6 weeks, a couple of weeks later. When they come to settle up with me in 2000, the end of 2000, my total was 968,000 or something like that. But what they did, they took the £300,000 out of that. They then charged me £92,000 interest on the 300 grand. They charged me, I think it was 56 or 58,000 pound for bed and board, or as they put it, saved living expenses. And because I'd been in trouble with the cops in the 60s, they deducted me another 25,000 pound.
So they say bed and board, did they mean for being in prison?
Aye.
Yeah. They charged you for being in prison?
Every one of us.
Unbelievable.
That's what they
I've never heard anything I believe.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's what they did.
Does it still
in England
continues?
and Wales.
Yeah, in
Scotland,
England and
they
Wales.
don't do it for miscarriage cases, but they do it in England and Wales.
That's insane.
That's what they did, you know. And of course the other, I got just over £500,000, and of course I had 6 children, and I bought 3 of them their own homes. That's the best I could do. And the rest, as I say, over the years, until we finally got financed by the Scottish Executive, and they only done it because I ran out of money and we were going to close it down. And but up until then I spent probably somewhere in the region about £250,000 to £300,000 of my compensation setting up and financing Mojo for 14 years.
Well, and like you say, this is the thing people I don't really get in terms of like when you come out of prison. Because it's one of those things that when something goes out of the news, it's just gone. You know what I mean? And people just kind of assumed after you guys have been in prison, oh, well that's it, then it's over.
Ever after.
You know what I mean? Good luck. They have Dodgers now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, from here the time I heard you talking to Joe Duffy, that's what kind of shocked me. I was like, because I was one of those ignorant people thinking, oh, sure, they're out now, that'll be fine. But I mean, the impact that the experience in prison itself, and obviously the whole horrible experience, the fact that you were wrongly convicted and sent to prison for something you didn't do, but prison itself, the fact that it had on you, and the lasting effect it had on you after prison, was the thing that really shook me. Because one thing I had never contemplated was the effect prison has on a person's psyche when they get rid of it. You know,
if you'd have told me the day that I was getting out that I wouldn't be able to handle the outside world, I would have laughed in your face.
Yeah.
That's what we've been through. Like maximum security prisons in the England room, 7 of them. And a lot of the people in them were ex-Broadmoor, Rampton, Carstairs, Cheadle House, Ashford House, all mental patients. And it's like a killing zone. It's like a battle zone. Fighting every day for survival, because you never knew when someone was from 7 o'clock in the morning when that door opened. Welcome to the killing field, because you don't know who's going to get killed or battered or stabbed or scut. Every day of the week it happens.
Yeah.
And of course, when we come out, I spent the first year campaigning for people, etc., up and down the country and abroad. And it was 1992 when I hit the wall. Phew. Talk about it like after the euphoria, and of course I was always running around And it was only in '92 when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer that I slowed down. And then it hit me. And even though I'm out now, I've been out 22 years, I probably spent half of it, Joe, wishing I'd never come out of jail.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways I was more, and maybe it's not the right words to use, but I can't find any other words, but I was more happy and contented in prison because I'd become conditioned.
Familiar with it, yeah.
I'd become conditioned to live in a brutal, violent world. And suddenly, the only thing the government did for us, they took us out of the prison, but they've never taken the prison out of us.
This is the thing people don't get, though, that there's rehabilitation in that respect for, people who are convicted of a crime. But for the likes of you, because you were innocent, because you were let go, there was. How does that work, Paul? You know more about that than I would.
Well, the quality of care for even guilty offenders coming out isn't that great, let's be honest about it, right? But at least there's something there. So what happens with a guilty offender is that they basically, if they're doing a long-term sentence, they get training for freedom to get acclimatise them back into the community that they're coming from. So they get home visits, etc. They may get work experience. They get all these sorts of things to decompress them back towards joining their family.
Like a reintegration type thing, yeah.
Exactly.
That would last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens?
Maybe longer.
With an innocent person whose conviction is quashed, and I'll give you the prime example of how it still continues and what the situation is. Dubliner, a guy called Victor Nealon, 13th of December last year, his conviction was quashed. He was sentenced to 7 years for an attempted rape. He actually spent 17 years in prison because he refused to admit his guilt, and they quashed his conviction 14 days before Christmas. They put him out the prison door with £46 in his pocket, and that was their responsibility to him ending at that point. And he was left to his own devices. Go and do what you're going to do, you're nothing to do with us. And that's how they treat innocent people when they put them out of prison.
Wow.
So our organisation is there. Paddy mentioned earlier we get funding for the Scottish Government. We only get funding for aftercare support for victims of miscarriage of justice. We have 10 other strands of the work that we do that's no funded, and even the money that we get for the Scottish Government has begun to be cut because of obviously the austerity measures. We congratulate the Scottish Government wholeheartedly. It's unique that a government would take on the responsibility of ensuring the duty of care that something's provided. In England and Wales, it couldn't be further for the truth. Obviously the organisation campaigned to have the needs of miscarriage of justice victims recognised, and the government to foot the bill for that. It was a long period where we a cross-party group of MPs. My predecessor in the job, John McManus, campaigned, and we got to a point with the government where we were in discussions with him. The minister at the time was Crispin Blunt, and the outcome of the process to try to get them to take on the duty of care was to admit in writing, yeah, we accept we've got a duty of care to people that are in this situation that we've created, but due to the austerity measures, we will not finance any support for care in these cases. So what you have is there is the Royal Courts of Justice, there's a Citizen Advice Bureau that provides basic support that's funded by the government, and that's the only support in England and Wales. Victor Nealon is the example I gave you. The Royal Courts of Justice support team didn't follow up when he was getting released, so he was released again the week before Christmas. I contacted him through a journalist and offered, know that we are supposed to do this, right, but I offered them the support of Mojo to try and tide him there. Mojo raised a wee bit of money for him. We assisted him with benefits issues and other issues related to his case, because he has other support where he is, but he was actually homeless. He was relying on friends to put him up, and he's still living in a friend's house in Birmingham at the moment, unsupported. And that's the situation, that's the stark reality for miscarriage of justice victims. So, and that continues. I mean, what you'll find, and Paddy will talk to you about this, and the reason for why we're there is to try and get care needs looked after, to try and get all the other needs, but they don't provide any psychological support. If you take, for example, and we use this example because it's the clearest example you can get. If you look at in the past, Terry Waite, Brian Keenan, John McCarthy were kidnapped by foreign governments. When they returned to the UK, they were taken to Bryce Norton Air Force Base. They were given intensive psychological support for a prolonged period of time.
And their families?
And their families, because they were victims of the evil foreign governments. But you become a victim of your own government, kidnapped, these people are kidnapped by their own government, held hostage for a prolonged period of time, and they get no support whatsoever. And it's similar for other similar issues in terms of other disasters that may have occurred in the UK, like say the Martinez disaster, the 7-7, Paddington rail crash. Everybody involved in these things, survivors and family members, are offered proper support counselling for however long is needed in order to try and get them back to some semblance of normality.
When these guys just turned out in the street, I mean, your sentence isn't over, it's just an extension of it, really.
Yeah, well, that's what Paddy talks about and others talk about. That
when you get out, Joe, you don't realise that in actual fact what you're doing is you're jumping out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah.
You're getting out of one nightmare, but unfortunately for us, we don't realise that we're stepping into another one.
And very often, what you see is the big image, because we've all seen it. We all know about miscarriage of justice, we're all aware of it. You see the happy face on the courthouse steps, or you see the angry face on the courthouse steps in the case of Jerry and Paddy making the statements against the injustice that they'd suffered. So that's the lasting image for people.
Yeah.
But that image is a false image, because, as you say, people's expectation is that's great, you've got your freedom, everything's great, hunky-dory, you're going to get a big wad of cash.
Aye.
The cash gets pissed up against the wall. People have psychological problems, they have drug addiction, alcohol addiction, any number of other problems forming relationships, problems trusting family members, families destroyed, and none of that's addressed. And it doesn't matter how much money you give somebody in that situation, that's not going to solve anything. If you don't put in psychological support, specialised psychological support, then what you're doing is you're leaving people to a slow death.
Yeah, so I mean, you basically just putting up with a lifetime of post-traumatic stress disorder, of which you probably don't even realise you have.
No, you don't.
You just think you're going bananas.
Yeah.
I mean, you just think that you're falling apart.
I think you're going mad, actually.
Yeah.
There has been.
There's no. I went to the psychiatrist when I first came out, James McKeith, who sadly is no longer with us. A wonderful man. James McKeith came and assessed us, and him and Gizzy Gunderson in prison for our 87 and 91 appeals. And he told me when you get out, he said, any problems, come and see me. So I went and seen him in London, and he sat me down. He said, you know what? He says, I would love to help you, but to be honest with you, he says, I don't know how to help you. He said, yes, I have experience in respect to people long-term in prison, but these are guilty people that I know that I've been helping. And he said to become what is more commonly known as institutionalised. And he said they find it hard to come out and to come to terms with their own guilt, etc. But he says, you've got nothing to be guilty about.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to treat you.
It's a different process, obviously.
Exactly. And that was it. And of course I fought for years, and in 2008 I finally got referred to a specialist up in Scotland, where I live in North Ayrshire, my local health council, Professor Randall. And I went and seen him, and I spent 2.5 hours with him, and he knew all about me and about Mojo and what I was doing. And after 2.5 hours he turned around and he looked at me and he said, Paddy, I'd love to help you, but you know what? I don't know what the hell to do with you. He said, I'm going to be honest, you need specialist help. And I haven't got anyone within our health service who's qualified and has the knowledge to deal with someone so severely traumatised as what you were. He said, so I'll wait another year. And then they sent me over to Professor Fields in Edinburgh, who's the head of all the Scottish trauma, everything. And he was in semi-retirement, and he came out to see me. And he spent 2 hours with me, and at the end of the 2 hours he turned around and he says, Paddy, I've got a problem. I said, what is it? He said, the same problem as Mr. Randall has. I don't know what the hell to do with you. I haven't got anybody to help you. So I waited another year, and then in 2010 my local health service decided that they'd give me treatment. They put me into the Caprio Nightingale with Professor Gordon Turnbull, who treated John McCarthy and Terry Waite and all the rest of them. And of course I went down to them for 3 months, every fortnight for 4 days, and I down to London, And I went in, I was staying with my solicitor, Gareth Pace, but I went in every morning till 5 o'clock at night, tell them about my lifestyle, etc., etc. And they know about I've got a wee bit of property up in Scotland, 20 acres. I don't sleep. When I get the bad moods, I go out, I take the dogs down the fields. I can walk about all hours in the morning. And then when I went down to the Capio Nightingale, I went in on Monday the 6th of July. I was back in Gareth Pearce's house 2 days later. I went down to London on the 6th of Sunday, went into Capio Nightingale on Monday the 7th, and on the Tuesday afternoon, I was in bits. Breaking my heart. I had to get out of it. They locked me up and said, you're not allowed to go out at night. You can't have a smoke. Nothing. It was worse than being in jail, and I was the only trauma victim. Everybody in there was in for alcohol and drug abuse.
But this was all they had to offer you, like?
And they offered me 28 days.
Of that?
Of that. And they're going to try and push 40 years nearly into what? 20 days of treatment, because they don't treat you on Saturday and Sunday. So you're 4 weeks in, there's only 5 days a week. Jerry Conlon done it before me. And Jerry would tell you himself that if he would do it again, he wouldn't do it, because it done him more harm than good.
Yeah.
They open you up like a tin of beans, and then they throw you out and what? And you're still wide open.
So was the issue then that no one has even bothered to even approach the idea of how to help innocent people in prison?
Apart from Mojo. Mojo's had a long-term goal attempting to open a trauma centre for victims of miscarriage of justice. The difficulty is obviously the financial meltdown that happened in 2008 kind of scuppered that idea, because you're talking about needing £1 million to open a trauma centre. So what we've had to do is redress and look at where we're actually at and what can we actually do as an organisation to provide care and support, because we're the only people providing that care and support. So to that end, we're working with the Scottish Government, in particular addressing the issue. We've give evidence to parliamentary committees. Some of the guys that are miscarriage victims have spoke to MSPs and told them of the experience and what they are trying to do in some ways to address it, but it's a slow process to try and get any action taken. So what we need to do is then find what can we do on the ground in order to make a difference in people's lives.
You mean like literally hand to hand, with face to face with people?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we run the office in Glasgow. The office is open to our clients on a daily basis, or the requirements as they need us. They can come and go as they need us. You might see somebody for an intense period of time where they need a lot of support, and then you might not see them for a year. But you know that they're going to at some point come back, because the underlying issues aren't being addressed, the psychological issues aren't being addressed. Now, there is some people, basically what you need today is, what's on offer is go to your GP, tell your GP your story. 9 times out of 10, the GP is so scared of what you're telling him that he doesn't know how to react and he doesn't know what to do. So you'll be referred on to your local mental health team. You get to the mental health team, and again you're faced with the same problem. Are you going to find somebody that's got the wherewithal and understanding to be able to make any inroads? Now, some of the guys have worked closely with counsellors and psychologists for long periods of time, and I know that certainly in Jerry's case, Jerry Conlon, Jerry thinks that he's coming to, at some point, to be able to have some understanding of what happened to him and accept in some ways what happened without giving up on the fight. We've got some other guys that it's maybe taken 5 years for them to make a breakthrough. We had one guy in particular, that was the first person I dealt with in the organisation, and I don't want to mention his name because his case isn't resolved yet, and it would be unfair to mention his name. But when I first met him, he was living in a cell-like environment in Edinburgh, in his house, in one room, and he lived as if he was in prison.
This is a similar thing that I heard you say on Joe Duffy as well, when you came out of prison, that you did a lot of that too. Yeah. You tried to recreate what it is you were familiar with.
You live in one room.
Yeah.
Everything that you want, your glasses, your pen, everything is there.
Because that's the normality you've come to it's the comfort, the only comfort you've had for 16 and a half years, as it was for yourself.
It's like what they say about people on the boats, cabin fever.
Yes.
You become used to that wee small space.
Well,
and
it's
that's
a controllable environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what then my job was to bring him out of that and find a way out of it for him. So the first thing was to get him a bigger house, so that he actually only had one room and a small room. Right? So what we done was go to my house with a bedroom and a kitchen, and he had to use the other spaces and get acclimatised to it. So eventually that was working for him. the psychological support that he was getting, he went for somebody that I would call a ghost. If you stood in a social situation with him, he wouldn't utter a word. He's not somebody that would involve himself or create a conversation. So over a 2-year period, we've seen the change in him. From that point of view, you were standing with him as a ghost, to the point where last summer we had him at the Scottish Parliament speaking in front of MSPs for over an hour, and he absolutely wowed the MSPs. Incredible. You know, the story, how he told his own story, was one of the first times he'd actually engaged in a public space with anybody outside our organisation, and he absolutely, just hit every nail on the head as to explain what was happening and how it had happened, why it happened, and what the psychological...
How long did that progression take him?
That was, he was released in... He served his entire sentence, right? He served 15 and a half years. He was released in life licence. His life licence was only dropped a year and a half ago. I think he was released in roughly 2005.
2004, 2005.
So he came out in 2005. He'd been jailed in 1996. So the effect is not only that, he'd been abused as a child. So he'd had an entire lifetime. He was arrested and jailed when he was 17. His entire lifetime had been as a victim of abuse, and then further abused by the system itself that exploited the abuse that he'd suffered as a child. So it's an entire lifetime of suffering, an entire lifetime to get to a point where he even felt comfortable to be able to express what was happening to him to other people, other than our people.
I imagine, well, this is me speaking complete ignorant here, people come to you like in terms of like people like that, if you've been a victim of the system, does it help them to begin with to meet someone like Paddy, or for you to tell them, listen, this is something we see all the time? Is it something that gives them at least some sort of comfort and trust?
Well, Paddy will tell you more about this, but I mean the guys feel more comfortable in each other's presence because at least it's somebody there that they don't need to explain it, they fall into the understanding of, well, I know where you've been.
You don't have to hide it, like, you know what I mean?
That's exactly, they come out of the shell when we're together, because when we're together, the slagging and the bantering.
Yeah.
And you're reminiscing about the good times in jail. It's like you're back there.
Yeah.
It's like soldiers meeting up after the war when they're traumatised. They go.
It's common bond.
Exactly. They're with their own. The only people that can relate to them and understand what they're talking about is someone who's been there. Mm-hmm. And this is the way it is. And I try to counsel people, but I have my own problems. But I tell people when they come out, hang on. And I try to tell them, this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah, there's no hiding from the
And when it does, don't go hiding away. Don't go start turning to alcohol or hard drugs, etc. You're going to have to face it. And they look at me and they go, you're talking shit. Am I? It may not happen this week, next month, but somewhere down the line, and it's usually about between 6 and 12 months after coming out.
Yeah.
When they hit the ground.
I imagine it's a steep and rapid decline.
Oh, once it goes, boom.
Our experience, people that came through the organisation and just be meeting others, is that 99% of people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's unsupported, as we've already mentioned. I mean, well, people, there's many suicides, many deaths.
Just gonna bring that up.
Many deaths for overdose or ending up back in prison because, again, feel comfortable in prison, know the environment and can accept it. The most recent death was a guy we were working with called John McIntosh. John killed himself New Year's Day because he just couldn't face it anymore. He couldn't face the pressure. He'd been out for, I think John had been out for 12 years. And just couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't, because they couldn't see, his conviction hadn't been quashed either, and he couldn't see any way forward to getting to the point where he would get a resolution in his case. And not only that, the psychological scars they haven't had to live with the sentence, live with the life outside, and not be able to cope, just drove him to be unable to take any more.
And how difficult is it proving for Mojo to move the wheels in terms of government, in terms of, like, you know, the health service, whatever, in terms of to make this widely known and for point out to the government, to point out to Parliament, to point out to health services, listen, this is a very, very important issue. I mean, how hard has it been? Like, do they listen? Do they want to listen?
We actually, last week we had the Cabinet Secretary for Justice visited the organisation for the first time since we were set up. First Cabinet Secretary for Scotland.
Kenny McCaskill.
So Kenny came along and was very receptive, very, very willing to listen to what we are planning today moving forward. And as I say, we've already got the backing in terms of some financial support. They realise it's not enough and it's not going to do the full job, because the money that they provide to us maybe meets the needs not even a quarter of the work that we do, right? So we need to then raise, just to stand still in the way we operate at the moment, to run the office. We've got 2 paid staff and we have a number of volunteers. In order to keep that and maintain that, we need to raise somewhere in the region, including the Scottish Government money, up to £120,000 a year. They give us 58,000, it's dropped to 57, I think.
55 now.
Aye, 55. And therefore we've got to fill that gap, just to stand still. Now, we've got big plans for the organisation. We want to expand and become more professional in the work that we do, and offer all in-house services, for legal services, all the way through to compensation. So if you come to us with your case, we want to have a solicitor in our office that solely works on appeal cases and will concentrate his time and effort on your case, because what's happening now with the loss of legal aid in cases, that people who are making protestations of innocence may have been down the road to a number of appeals, have hit the wall, they can't get any more finance for their case. So we feel that that's a gap we are attempting to fill, to ensure that people's cases are looked at properly, because solicitors don't have the time. And certainly in Scotland, from our point of view, I mean, in England you've got Gareth Pearce, you've got a number of other campaign and civil rights solicitors, you've got good people that are trying down there. In Scotland there's a dearth of decent civil rights lawyers, so we feel that it's necessary that we step into that gap. As I say, we intend that we'll have somebody, if possible, to carry him through his case, get their convictions squashed, get them back into the community, provide them with the medical support that's required, and provide them with the legal services to take them through the minefield that is getting compensation. Because another point that's worth noting, compensation is not an automatic right to a miscarriage of justice victim. Right? Certainly in Scotland there's 2 schemes. There's an ex gratia scheme and I'm not sure if it's the right term, a non-gratia scheme, right? Where the government will examine your case and see if it finds that they have made a gross misconduct, and therefore if there's gross misconduct, then you're due compensation. But if they look at it, the due process of law is being carried out here, right, which means you've been in maybe 5 years, you get your appeal, you win your appeal, then justice has been seen to be done, you're not entitled to compensation. Now that's the way it is. In England it's even worse, because now what they've done, the Barry George case is the example for it. Barry George, convicted of killing Jill Dando, had his conviction quashed, retried and found not guilty. You're not getting compensation. Why is he not getting compensation? Because you're not innocent enough. That's the judgment.
That is the judgment that the Supreme Court made. You're not innocent enough to receive compensation.
Because there was a prima facie case to answer, which means there's enough evidence to charge you, that's enough evidence to refuse you compensation. Insanity, complete and total insanity.
That's absolutely mental.
That's what they do, yeah.
Give a one hand take with the other. That's incredible.
Well, not even
give at all.
You're an insult to us. Yeah. No, you beat us and you're an insult to us. That's the way the English and English government, the Westminster government, treat miscarriage of justice victims. Absolutely disgraceful. They won't provide medical care and support for their victims, because they are the victims. We've said this. The miscarriage of justice victims are hostage of their own state. Yeah. Now, they are so embarrassed by that, because the great British justice system can't be like that. We don't treat people like this, supposedly, but in fact, every day, they treat people in an absolutely disgusting, horrific, horrible manner, that if any other country was doing it, there would be an outcry, there would be a human rights outcry on it, and our government skate away from it every time.
That's deplorable. That's just unbelievable. I mean, we're running tight on time. These lads have got a plane to catch. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of people getting in contact with you, I mean, in terms of being, for all kinds of things, be it donating or be it just trying to bring their case to you.
Well, we've got a website, www.miscarriagesofjustice.org. All the information of the organisation's on that site. But we do want to mention, and it's very important, is Paddy is trying to get the government to open up the case files in his case. There's a 75-year embargo. This is unheard of as well. I mean, Thatcher's papers have been released, the stuff about the miners' strike's been released, Hillsborough papers have been
Bloody
released,
Sunday.
Birmingham 6,
And the
Hibney, and then the
Birmingham
Guildford 4,
6
Maguire
were
7,
for
75-year immunity clause on their papers. What is the government hiding?
Hiding something, yeah.
So recently, Paddy got in contact with family members of the Birmingham bombing, right, who had been led to believe by the police since Paddy and the others' release that in fact, no, a mistake's been made. We got the right men, nobody else is guilty, right? That day, it was 185 people injured, 21 people killed,
Yeah.
and all these people have been led to believe that the Birmingham Six are still guilty.
Still
guilty. That is now, when Paddy met the Hambletons, it's Julian Bryan Hambleton. Paddy met Julian Bryan. There was a TV documentary that's available online.
I seen it,
to
yeah.
be watched, and that is hard viewing, right? And I'll let Paddy take the story up on it.
Yeah, well, what you call it, when I met the Hamiltons and I heard that the Birmingham police, since someone, I don't know who it is, someone in authority authorised in April or May 2012, they handpicked 17 specialist, experienced anti-terrorist officers who have been consolidating and getting all the material in respect to the Birmingham pub bombings, and they're reassessing it. They've been at it now for nearly 2 years, and I don't know what they're doing. They promised the Hamiltons that they would give them certain copies of documentation and they would answer certain questions which they wrote down for them. Then they came along last year and told them, you're not getting nothing. And the reason why you're not getting nothing, because it's all marked secret. And of course, when I met them, I went, well, what the hell are you talking about? What's secret? And of course, Brian and Julie asked me if I had any documentation. And I just snapped and said, of course, listen, let me tell you something. I am a great paper hoarder. I have kept everything from day one, all our transcripts of our trials, investigations, forensics, you name it, appeals. I have the whole lot. And of course, my solicitor Gareth Pearce, we facilitated them last year, and Brian and Julie came down and we gave them certain documentation. We downloaded the 1987 appeal for them, give them the whole lot, and we give them other documentation, and we're still feeding them more documentation if they wanted. And of course, Brian and Julie had a knee-line petition up, and to get 100,000 signatures. And I thought myself that, hey, in Birmingham they'll get that easy, but unfortunately it didn't. And all I can say, shame on the people of Birmingham. Because if anybody should want to know the truth, it should be the people of Birmingham. Yeah. And of course, their petition ran out at the end of January, and I set one up now. And I'm hoping that we can do it better. I can do it better.
So yours is an e-petition, because I put it up on the blog, I put it in Hill Media, I'll put it up again when I put this podcast up, and I'll put the links up and I'll put them on Twitter. So the idea is you want to reopen the case files.
Yes. What it is, the petition's available at hm.gov petition site. It's justice for all the victims of the Birmingham bombings. That's what it's listed under, to make sure that everybody is addressed in it, right? So that's available, that's where it is. The incredible thing is, and Paddy's described that to you, the main victims are the people that died, right? But the Birmingham Six were equally victims to this whole thing, and it's took the Birmingham Six, who were victimised by the state again, to give the information required by the families who lost people. The only people that's ever explained anything to any of the families is Paddy Hill.
Yeah.
And how crazy, is it Alice in Wonderland we're in?
Doesn't make any sense.
It's madness. It's absolute and total madness.
I mean, well, it seems to me like as corrupt as it was back then, it's still the same now.
Well, it's no change. Nothing's
Nothing.
changed. Since Paddy was released in 1991, it's been registered by the Lord Chancellor's office are the only people that produce figures for miscarriage of justice. The last figures that were produced, I think,
2007.
2007, 5,600 capital cases, which is 4 years and above, right? Cases quashed since then. So that's 6,000 people in a similar situation to them. Now that's 6,000 who have had their convictions quashed, right?
Yes.
When you go to the appeal court, the statistics for the appeal court is the success at the appeal court. Only 5% of those that apply to the appeal court are successful in having their convictions quashed. How many more then does that say there are innocent people sitting, languishing behind prison doors.
Something else I want to bring up. Just kind of finish off. I'll bring us back to the airport. I mean, I hear a lot about, and I kind of notice that we live in a time where there's money to be made and putting people in prison.
Yeah. Oh,
it's private
privatisation.
There's a prison
like
industrial
America,
complex.
we're going down the American road.
Exactly. That's where I first heard about that. I mean, an organisation like Mojo going into like times like that. If that continues, which I don't see any reason why it wouldn't continue.
Well, the major problem, and Paddy was addressed a meeting a fortnight ago in London. The solicitors in England have been going on strike to try and protect legal aid. Right now, we've already begun to get the effects of the legal aid cuts because people can't get basic justice because it won't be paid for them. What they're trying to push in is a system of supermarket justice, right? And you'd be lucky if the person that represents you has any real understanding of what criminal law is, right? And that's the system that they're trying to bring in. We've begun to get people inquiring to us because, as I say, their cases hit the wall. Funding will be made available to continue appeals. Now, the difficulty is in that situation is Paddy had two appeals before he was successful. The Guildford 4 had 4 appeals.
We had three
appeals, right? So there's other people tell us they've had 6 appeals, right? What the advocates of law and order tell us is you've got to have finality in law. You can't keep this continuing. Now, you tell that to an innocent person sitting in prison that you need to give up on your fight for justice, that you need to be quiet, accept your lot and leave us alone because we need finality and peace. If they're making the mistake, and in fact one of the big problems is that they never address why miscarriage of justice happen, neither through the police forces that fit people up, why they're allowed to get away with it. There's no redress there, there's no redress through the CPS or the Crown. When they make a mistake, they don't go back and reinvestigate or check what the problem is, because their position is, we were right. 99% of the cases that they deal with, they feel that it's the justice system that's made a mistake in letting innocent people out, that in fact there was nothing wrong with our inquiries, and there's no redress to it. One police officer in 30 odd years has been in prison for fitting an innocent person up, and he gets 4 years. The guys that he fitted up done 10 years each in prison for a murder they didn't commit. The evidence that would have freed them was hidden by the police squad involved. Fife Constabulary had statements that showed that the guy that they'd been charged with murdering was alive 3 days after.
5 days?
5, right. So they claimed he was dead. They had witness statements stating clearly, we've seen the guy, he was in the shop, he was here, there and everywhere.
He was in the pub.
Right, and Richard Monroe, Inspector Richard Monroe, had these statements along with his colleagues. He was punished for it, went to prison, but he's the only police in the entire history of either English jurisprudence or Scottish jurisprudence or England, Northern Ireland, anywhere, any part of the so-called UK that anybody's ever been brought to justice. And see if there's no penalty for fitting people up or creating this situation, well, why there be any reason not to do?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's not really a justice system, it's a system of convictions.
Exactly.
And what it is,
it's all about convictions on the conveyor belt, that sort of things. They're not interested in respect of innocent or guilt. They're only interested in getting the conviction.
Because we spoke about this yesterday, John Charles Jimenez, when he gets shot in the tube, right? The officers, the team involved in shooting him, the firearms squad that were involved in that, they threatened to withdraw their service if the inquiry pursued them. We will not go out as armed police. We will put our guns down, and you will need to deal with the aftermath of that. We'll walk away, and that's the threat that they made. Rather than face justice, they used their power to create that situation, and the government capitulated to that. And that's the society we live in. That's the society, the state we live in.
That's the scary thing, though.
It is indeed.
That we still live in that. Well, listen, lads, it's 5 to 7. You boys have got a plane to catch. I want to thank you very much for meeting me here. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet both of you. I'm going to add a few extras onto this here, me talking, explaining the petition and the download of the song, whatever. And I just can't thank you so much.
Joe,
thanks very much.
Joe, it's been a pleasure.
Paddy,
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you
Absolute pleasure, sir.
I'll shut this down. Right, lads, I'm just going to save this, shut it down. I'll get this to the airport now.
So there you have it, the Paddy Hill Mojo Scotland podcast that I was so hoping to get done, and I was delighted to actually sit down with Paddy and Paul and do it. I want to thank them for the time. They were pushed for time, and they made space for me, which was really, really appreciated. I'm going to play the podcast with the song that I wrote for Paddy about 6 or 7 years ago. And if you want to download the song, you can go to www.miscarriagesofjustice.org and go to Songs of Freedom, and you'll find it in there. It's called Prison with Me. Now, it's going to also go up on iTunes over the weekend, so on the HomeBhoys show on Monday night, hopefully I'll have a link that people can follow and download the song. And I would really like people to support this because, as Paul said in the podcast, there are lots of people still in prison, innocent people in prison. and nobody's helping them. And even when they do get out, if they do get out, there's nothing to help them when they do get out to adjust to the outside world. And I think when a government imprisons someone, or as Paul puts it, kidnaps someone essentially, puts them in prison, and if they are successful in being released, when they do get out, there's just another sentence in the outside world. There's no support for them. And as Paul said, they're just seen as an embarrassment. They proved the system wrong, and they were released, and there's extra punishment for that. And I find that really, really, really horrible and really hard to get my head around. That's not just. It's not fair. And I'm a person that believes in justice, and I think everybody that listens to our show are people that believe in justice. And if we can do even the smallest part to help Paddy and Paul support people out there who are going through real, real serious trauma from being miscarriages of justice, I think it's worth it. So thanks very much for listening. I'm going to play it with the song Prison With Me. Really hope you enjoy it. Please download the song, www.miscarriageofjustice.org. Check out the at HomeBhoys Twitter feed and my own Twitter feed at JoeLercoaster, JoeLercoaster. And please download the song and try and help out Paddy Hill and Paul McLaughlin at Mojo. And thanks very much. Talk to you soon. Hail, hail.
They promised me sunlight and the world in my hands, and they said that I'd be an upstanding citizen, and the world would just lay down and bend to my needs. But they ran out of guidebooks, the rules to being free. And I bet they're gonna make me take this prison with me. This prison with me. Prison with me. And I don't recognize my shadow, and I'm burnt by this wind. And they want me on the radio, and those that want me home again. But I still count the footsteps of the cell I lived in, and how the man slept below me was my nearest kin. And I can't pick up this phone now, can't turn on this TV. They want me to come tell my story, tell them how great it must be. Do they really want to know how they make me take that prison with me? That prison with me. Prison with me. Now all the headlines are faded, my story's well told. They all got what they needed, 16 and 6-fold. They say I'm well compensated, and I can happily grow old. But my soul's been deflated now from my time in the hole. This world's complicated now, and I can't find no peace, and I feel alienated now on the streets with everybody, and I just feel like screaming. I think I'm crazy, 'cause I knew they were gonna make me take that prison with me. Oh, yes, I knew they were gonna make me take that prison with me. Oh, well, I knew they were gonna make me take that prison with me. Took that prison with me. 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 Took that prison with me.